Thank you for joining us again and welcome back to our channel. We appreciate your time and we give you all a huge thumbs up. In this episode, I really want to dive into some specifics about the region.
Talking about being an actor in history, one of the issues as well that I think we need to speak about is the fact that many countries, external countries, have established their foreign military bases here on the continent, and with some justifying the bilateral agreements as protecting their interests. Is this growth an indication that the continent and the African Union lacks in its responses to prevailing peace and security measures and issues? Because, you know, this is also bringing about threats from different terrorist organizations.
The militarization of Africa is today one of the most important challenges we are facing. Of course, under the pretext that Africa needs peace and security, there are a lot of intervention, not really to protect African interests, the interests of the African people, but to, unfortunately, to further their own particular interests on the continent. Wherever, when you look at the map of Africa today, there is a growing concern about the establishment of more and more military bases on the continent, wherever.
Today, I will be diving into one of Africa's most experienced ambassadors who have been in the military environment with regards to geopolitics. As you know, we made a video here a couple of months ago talking about the scramble for Africa, and that particular expert gave his own input, which was, a lot of people said, was on point. But today, I have a video to play for you with regards to how he went even a lot deeper with regards to the leadership challenges in the continent of Africa, what Africa needs to do, the African voice. So I will dive into some specifics. Before I play the video, this is what I would like to say. The continent of Africa has been grumbling over the past couple of years. But most recently, the continent of Africa has started speaking for the first time. The African geopolitical partners over the years never got to understand the continent. I think from the perspective that I see it was that Africa was just basically complaining. But now the continent is making decisions and selecting its own partners, and also making sure that to an extent they are putting their citizens first in different parts across the region. If you look at the Sahelian states, that they are moving to make sure that they consolidate power and also improve on their security. The partners of Africa want to hear the continent speak. They don't want to see people grumbling. If you grumble, they do not understand you guys. If you go ahead and say it the way it is, then you become a interactive, or you can work together in several ways. In this episode, I will be diving into some specifics why the continent of Africa should wake up and start dealing in a strategic way with regards to its geopolitical partners, and more importantly, putting the Africa's people's interests first. Let's kick this interview and we will join you on the other side.
The 14th Thabo Mbeki Africa Day Lecture is an annual event held to reflect the progress made by the African continent in various areas such as politics, economy and culture. It also serves as a platform to discuss current challenges and opportunities that face the continent and, of course, the way forward. This year's lecture will be delivered by Senegalese Professor Abdoulaye Bathily. He has held numerous positions, including being Senegal's Senior Minister in the Office of the President, in charge of African affairs, his most recent former position as the Special Representative for Libya and the head of the United Nations Support Mission in Libya. This was held until last month. Professor Bathily joins us in studio to talk more about the 14th Thabo Mbeki Africa Day Lecture. It's wonderful to host you in studio, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you to have me on your program.
It's an absolute pleasure. So you'll be delivering the 14th Thabo Mbeki Lecture under the theme, The New International Scramble for Africa and the Challenges of Unity. It's an interesting theme this year. How does it talk to where we are currently as a continent and our influence in global geopolitics?
Well, Africa faces today a number of challenges of the role of the continent on world scene, challenges of economic development, challenges of peace and security, and of course cultural issues, as you mentioned. And I must say that those challenges are very, very important today, and it is important for us to overcome them, and we will have to discuss how to overcome them, how the African citizens should mobilize, should revive the liberation agenda.
Africa's geopolitical partners have sensed weakness in the African leadership model. That's the reason why they could post some of the leaders around, because they never had a unified position. And the countries in the Sahel have decided to go it alone. If they are doing the right thing, we will find out. If they are doing the wrong thing, we will find out. But again, they have decided to take their future in their own hands and make strategic decisions and work with partners that will, to an extent, make significant contribution in their own development, their security, their collaboration, and the win-win partnership, which is more important. Remember, African countries have not said they want to work with just the Russians or Chinese or the European Union or the United States of America. They want to diversify their partners and look at a number of options that are out there. You can't tie these countries to work with just one country. It could be France or the United States or Russia alone or China. No, the continent leaders need to put it on the table clearly that we want to work with everybody, and that's the way it's going to be, as simple as that. That's why the Sahelian countries have been called out in a number of ways. They have been questioned if what they are doing. But I think the leaders there have decided that we want to try something new, and that's the way it's going to go. There's nothing that's going to change. Every country's sovereign nations have to make decisions. So I don't see why the countries decide its own decision. It's become unusual.
A very big thing as well, and we often speak to it, doesn't matter which country on the continent we speak to, but we also talk of the protection of our mineral resources. How do we as a continent work towards this?
Well, the scramble of Africa for Africa by international players is about mainly the African resources, mineral resources, but also the economic assets, other economic assets of Africa. So this is what it's about. And there is a geopolitical play out today in Africa. And Africa is considered as an important playground for most international players, precisely because of that.
Yeah, indeed it is, and it's an issue of trying to do business in a way that benefits the people of the continent, because that seems to be where we fail a lot, is that the outside world seems to benefit more than the people of Africa.
Well, this has to do something to do with the leadership crisis going on in Africa today. And I think it is important by African citizens at all levels, civil society organizations, political parties, citizens individually, to rise up and to try to do something about these situations so that Africa can become a positive actor, not a subject of history, but an actor of history at this point in time.
When the African diplomat Abdoulaye Bantele of Senegal's origin resigned from his role as UN envoy to Libya, he said there was too much political issues and stall in terms of the political process. But I don't see it that way. I see Libya as a mess based on foreign intervention that was uncalled for at the time, and that's the price for if peace is put aside and something else brought in regards to force. We all see what's happening in the Sahel at the moment. We all see what's happening in Ukraine, and we see what's happening in Gaza between Israel and Palestine. So this is something which I think the ambassador will dive into more specifically. And I think that Libya has been a disgrace based on the intervention that happened, and a number of Africa's geopolitical partners have accepted. Even the former president of the United States of America, Barack Obama, called Libya's intervention a shit show. That's what he said. And that's to give you a picture of how once peace is put aside and war is chosen for the way forward, then this is what we get.
Talking about being an actor in history, one of the issues as well that I think we need to speak about is the fact that many countries, external countries, have established their foreign military bases here on the continent, and with some justifying the bilateral agreements as protecting their interests. Is this growth an indication that the continent and the African Union lacks in its responses to prevailing peace and security measures and issues? Because, you know, this is also bringing about threats from different terrorist organizations.
The militarization of Africa is today one of the most important challenges we are facing. Of course, under the pretext that Africa needs peace and security, there are a lot of intervention, not really to protect African interests, the interests of the African people, but to, unfortunately, to further their own particular interests on the continent. Wherever, when you look at the map of Africa today, there is a growing concern about the establishment of more and more military bases on the continent, wherever.
And it is a worry, it is a big concern when these things start happening. And it's, I suppose, one thing that we need to, again, emphasize is the leadership issues. And we need to see more leadership on the continent. And when you look at the continent, are you satisfied with the quality and the type of leadership that we are getting?
As I said, we are facing a serious leadership crisis in many countries and globally on the continent. The crisis of democracy, the democratic dispensation, the crisis of leading to the management of the resources of the continent, the issue of corruption, the issues of fair distribution of resources among citizens. All these are issues which are of importance to citizens today. And citizens are rising up, especially the young people, the women, who want to have a better share of the resources of the respective country.
On the issue of natural resources, the ambassador is spot on. When we talk about the scramble and the geopolitical influence of foreign partners, remember, Africa cannot do it alone. Africa will need to work alongside its global partners. Africa does need to engage its partners from its own strategic interest. Once the continent of Africa starts adding value to its mineral resources, then the continent has a say in a number of areas. If you look at the Thabo Mbeki report that came out a couple of years ago, where it clearly mentioned that the continent of Africa loses billions of dollars every month. In a year, I think, if my memory serves me well, it's over 500 billion US dollars a year. That's a huge amount of money that leaves the continent. So how can Africa figure out? Talking about leadership, like I pointed out, Africa's geopolitical partners have sensed weakness in the African leadership model. That's the reason why you saw what happens in Niger, and the president travels to France, having conversations where he has huge economic challenges in his own country, cannot resolve them. The Western partners don't understand why. I think that France never told the president of Niger not to put in water or build good hospitals. You can give credit in that area. It doesn't take billions of US dollars to build a hospital in your own country. So they have sensed weakness in that area. It means your people are not with you. That's why countries that are outspoken, look in the continent, are able to move strategically ahead. Look at Rwanda. Look at South Africa. Look at Tanzania. Look at Uganda, Zimbabwe. They are, of course, developing to an extent. They have challenges. Look at Morocco. Look at Algeria. They are making strategic choices. So these countries are looking towards the future. So to an extent, it is important that leadership starts speaking out. Once you speak out, might not be the most popular thing, but again, your geopolitical partners will know where you stand. On the issue of the Kenyan president visiting the United States of America, Ambassador Bentilli looked at that, saying that that was more of a side issue. The more strategic issues should be that the continent of Africa working in unity to engage in geopolitical partners. If Africa is broken into pieces, it's very easy for a geopolitical partners to manipulate and also drive their own interest. That's a clear message. So he talked about unity, which is more important in a number of areas. Let's dive back into the video.
I want to look at quite an important event that's taking place at the moment, and that is the visit of the Kenyan president to the United States of America. We're seeing William Ruto there, the president. This is a very historic visit for many reasons, because we haven't seen something like this in a good couple of years. Perhaps you could talk to us about the significance of this visit for the continent.
Well, I'm not in a position to comment on that visit. What I am just want to mention is the importance of African leaders to really come together as a unified leadership to face the challenges of the continent. Because the issue of unity is not about one country facing one major power, because this is not the issue. What is most important today, of course, bilateral issues are important for a given country to deal with, but from the perspective of the continent, what is important, there is a need today for African leaders to come together as a bloc to face the challenges of the continent, and also to face the challenges raised by the scramble of international players. We should not be allowed to be dealt with individually, but collectively. What kind of strategy we could put in place as a common leadership to face the realities of the world today, to put Africa on the world scene as a progressive actor which look at its own future to shape its own destiny. And this can be done only if we are united. As Kwame Nkrumah has said, Africa must unite.
Yeah.
This motto is still very, very, very necessary.
That's why Africa has become a playground for foreign military bases, looking at Djibouti, looking at the Horn of Africa, and a number of other countries who are intending to build military bases in the continent. Don't get me wrong, Africa needs partners to work together. Russia, China, the European Union, United States, India, and a number of other countries. These geopolitical partners have sensed that Africa cannot protect itself, that Africa is weak in security. That's why, to an extent, they have to protect their own resources and their strategic interests. This is an important area where Africa needs to re-strategize itself and put its own people first. The ambassador also looked into what's happening around the world in Ukraine, talk about what's happening in Sudan, and more importantly, also refer to issues happening in Israel and also among Palestine. Well, to him, that he considered the current challenges in the Middle East to be a liberation issue. That those countries are, that's his own word, that he perceived that to be a liberation goal, that the Palestinians are engaging the Israelis in several ways to fight for their own liberation in a number of other areas. So these are top-level issues that are plaguing the global community, and Africa has a stake on it, and Africa needs to say where it stands. Africa has to be clear in terms of its communication. Africa hasn't been clear all these years, and that's why the people in West Africa, especially in the Sahel region, are more clearer now, and is causing issues in the geopolitical setting.
Today, however, is a very big day as well for a role that South Africa has been taking at the International Court of Justice. Obviously, I imagine you've been following it quite closely, with South Africa approaching that court, and now the ruling on South Africa's request for additional measures in regard to what is happening in Gaza and Israel, and South Africa having a very big role in this and leading the way in terms of trying to seek what South Africa believes is justice for the people of Gaza. Perhaps you want to weigh in on, as a continent and as a country, South Africa, what this is doing for our stance again in the geopolitical front.
Well, the action taken by South Africa, I must say, is a very commendable action which is applauded throughout Africa by the citizens, by whoever cares about the issue of liberation, because the issue of Palestine, beyond Palestine, it is an issue of liberation. Therefore, it is particularly a commendable action to be taken, and it should be supported not only by Africans but other peace-loving people throughout the world. And the liberation issue is very important, and I'm happy that South Africa has taken this issue.
The ambassador was pretty clear in terms of the freedom of movement and also travel across the region. When a question was posed with regards to how he perceived the freedom of movement in the region, he made it pretty clear that it's a disgrace in terms of the difficulties if you consider the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is now in the implementation phase. And if one of Africa's sons, who would consider one of the biggest investors in the continent of Africa, not just open businesses in his own country, but in other countries across the region, faces difficulties to travel across the continent, that is a big red flag with regards to where the continent is going.
Quite an interesting statement that was made by Aliko Dangote this I don't know if it was this week or a few weeks ago, where he was talking about the fact of traveling as an African within the continent. You need about 35 different visas to move freely within our own continent. I want to get your stance on this, on the freedom of movement within the continent, and how we can sort of look at bringing Africa more together. It's something you focused on quite a bit during this interview, but try and almost integrating it with the whole issue of the free trade area agreement that we've got going, but also the movement of Africans within Africa.
Well, as you know, Africa is divided. When you look at this map of Africa today, it is sure that those borders are colonial borders, of course. And since 1963, when the Organization of African Unity was launched, the aim was to make unity happen. Unity is not just political, it's about also the economy. I believe that if we create the conditions for the African free continental trade, to give opportunity of young people, of entrepreneurs, or business people to go around Africa, to be able to come together, to form enterprises beyond any given country, we will have the conditions for economic development.
Yeah.
Most of our markets are too small to cater for the opportunities, employment opportunities for young people. For instance, everybody talk about the youth bulge. Millions of young people come to the labor market every year in Africa. How to deal with this issue? We can do it only if we create the conditions for economic development through enterprises who are centered towards the interests of the people of Africa, not the interests of international corporations. This, so long as we keep those colonial borders, so long as we go on what I call the colonial legacy, we cannot cater for young people, for women, and Africa need economic prosperity. Africa needs to use its wealth, huge wealth, to create the conditions for prosperity for young people, better education, better health. This is what unity is about. It's not just about politics. Politics is important because, of course, in terms of the values, it carries the value of for liberations, the mobilization for Africa to own its own destiny, to shape a better future for all the people.
Hopefully we've informed you in regards to the geopolitical issues and geoeconomic challenges that the continent of Africa face. These type of conversations are relevant for decision makers in the region to listen carefully. Our channel is being watched by Africa's geopolitical partners and African officials themselves. Listen, Africa should have observer status in the European Union and in the United States and in China and in Russia as well, including the Middle Eastern Parliament. It's important for Africa to set its tentacles into those regions and engage its partners from a different perspective. The continent of Africa will never be the same again. Africa would have to re-strategize itself or face huge challenges in the 21st century. We want to thank you for watching. Leave us a comment, watch some of our other informative videos on this YouTube channel, give us a like, keep the conversation going. We are looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.